Lucretius. Wait, who's that guy? So Lucretius was a first century BC, so pre-Christian poet and philosopher. He's famous for writing on the nature of things. He is essentially a classical ancient Epicurean, which that was a philosophy that developed in around 300 BC, Athens, Greco-Roman world. That basically the part Lucretius seems to pick up on the most is this atomic divisibility, invisibility of the structure and makeup of all things, which, practically speaking, by modern scientific standards, he was definitely onto something at an atomic level. However, there's clear oversight, we would say, in terms of the scientific method in his view, and that he thought basically if you go small enough, everything is essentially the same thing. It's only a matter of size, and all these small elements that we can't see make everything up, and they're all going down to the void. But needless to say, scientifically speaking, yes, naturally he was onto something there. If you read Christian writers, the early church fathers, reformers, they would regard him as one of the profane poets. That doesn't mean his writing, if it was made into a movie or a YouTube video, is going to get a PG-13 or an R rating. All that means is profane in the uh, sense of antiquity, that it is not sacred or religious, and in fact, in Lucretius's sense, against what is sacred and what is religious. Lucretius was one of the earliest and first naturalists in the world, and he lived 90s BC and upward. I'm not sure the age in which he or year in which he died. I'd have to look that up. Uh, but essentially, he's a free thinker. We would say he would find a home in the new atheist camp if he were around today, espousing rationalism as a system and a worldview of belief. And it seems as though he would hold it as a worldview and belief. But otherwise, he has morality and general civic and societal morality in his thinking and writings. Another thing, if you were to look into Lucretius, that you would find is he is also famous for what people today call the Lucretius problem, or we could say more specifically the Lucretius assumption, which is a good anecdote in terms of our human reasoning and capabilities and just our expectations. The Lucretius assumption is basically to say, look, we as humans naturally assume that if we've seen the biggest or the best or the hardest or the worst in terms of a mountain or an experience or a thunderstorm, our assumption is, well, that's the worst, that's the biggest, that's the hardest, which is like that's just a blind spot in your human experience. If you see the biggest mountain that you've ever seen, you assume it's the biggest that there is. It ain't necessarily the case. And so it should just bring to our awareness that if we're struggling in your life, it could be worse. Or if you're succeeding, it could be better. You don't know the outer limits of extremes, good or bad. Well, I hope that was helpful in learning a little bit more about Lucretius, first century poet and philosopher. Thanks for listening.